Broadcasting live from an undisclosed location. This is the TC MMA Podcast with your host, Chris Cross.
Whoa!
Dana White privilege.
Let's go, baby! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go, baby!
Dana White privilege. Privilege. Privilege.
What up, what up? This is your boy Chris Cross checking in. This is a TC MMA podcast. Lots to discuss today. Some interesting things going down in the news. We're going to get into the Q&A a little bit. We'll discuss the Adesanya versus Du Plessis poll that we posted. And then finally, and really most importantly, Dana White's Contender Series begins tomorrow night. Tuesday night fights are back for 10 straight weeks. Let's go.
Yes! Yes!
And that's exciting. So not only do we have fights on Saturday nights, there is a week off coming up in about 3 weeks, Labor Day. But every Tuesday for the next 10 weeks, we got fights to watch and to discuss. So let's get into the news first. A couple things going on. Number one, the UFC Apex Center is shutting down in November for renovations. That's great news. The Apex is going to be getting an upgrade, which means more seats and just a better experience. More fans. That's really important. Also, Paddy Pimblett issues warning to current UFC lightweight champion Islam Makhachev. So we'll get into that. Also, Israel Adesanya goes off on privileged Dricus Du Plessis. So what did he have to say? We'll talk about that here momentarily. So back to the top. The Apex Center, the UFC Apex Center in Las Vegas, where you have a lot of UFC fight nights, where they host The Ultimate Fighter, where they have Dana White's Contender Series. The Apex Center is getting renovations beginning in November. Probably once the fight nights in November are done, of course, by October, Dana White's Contender Series will be done. And then it'll shut down for about 6 months, which is good news because that means all the fight nights and, of course, the pay-per-views especially will be in different cities. So that's great news. Dana White saying recently the Apex is going under construction. We're actually expanding the Apex. It's going to be bigger and better. We're doing like a $25 million expansion on the Apex. There's going to be hospitality, more bathrooms, bigger, more seating. Yeah, we're expanding. So this is great news. I mean, the biggest news for me is that it's going to be bigger and they're going to be able to have more fans. So if they do have, 5 to 10 fight nights there a year of the 30 that they have, at least we're going to have more fans. Because right now it's really quiet, right? It's okay for the Contender Series. It's okay for the Ultimate Fighter. In fact, it's perfect for the Ultimate Fighter because you can hear the rest of the team yelling and screaming along with the coaches. Like it's been great with Shevchenko and Grasso because they're yelling and screaming the whole time. You can hear everything they're saying. So it's great in those situations. But when there's a fight night like last week, it's just really quiet and almost no fans other than, friends and family and things like that. So this is going to be a big deal and it'll be shut down for 6 months. Paddy Pimblett issues warning to current UFC lightweight champion Islam Makhachev. What did he say? He says, Islam, we're coming. And is Paddy Pimblett on that level? I get he beat Bobby Green. And, he beat Bobby Green much in the same way that Islam beat him. Just finished him, man. Made it look easy against Bobby Green. So maybe, he does have some sway where you can start talking about the champion. He still has more work to do, but I'm not against what he's doing. I mean, at some point when you keep winning, you got to look up at the champ and make some noise. That's the bottom line, and that's what he's doing. So Paddy Pimblett is coming. The word is he's already gained 42 pounds since his last fight 2 weeks ago. So you figure 155 plus 42, he's looking at 197 pounds. So he's sitting around 200 pounds. Then he goes back down to 155 for fights. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, it really is incredible. Israel Adesanya goes off on privileged Dricus Du Plessis. We paved the way for him. He tells TMZ Sports, I just want him to take accountability for his remarks. I'm also glad my friend Abdul Razak Al Hassan said it before his fight about 3 weeks ago, saying, I respect Dreykus, but he's a B for what he said. He's a B because Dreykus is saying, I trained in Africa. I do this in Africa. And people like Razak and myself who are forced to flee our country because of a better opportunity. Yeah. So they're really going after Dreykus. He'll never understand that because he lives behind the gates of his privileged life in South Africa, and he's able to do that there. So someone like Francis, who had to cross a desert to go overseas to go train, if you know Francis' story, you can't call him not a real African champion because he didn't train in Africa. Like, bro, are you kidding me? The guy who sent back, the guy got sent back out to the desert 6-7 times into a bad situation, and he survived. So this is the big talk this week, right, between Adesanya and Du Plessis, and this is why Adesanya went into the octagon after Du Plessis beat Strickland and started, going off. There's some things going on there behind the scenes between these two, and they want after each other really bad, and quite frankly, I can't wait to see it. Now, in today's poll that we posted, 57% of you are for Dreykus Du Plessis, right? 57% of the people polled think Dreykus is going to win the fight, but that lets you know that it's going to probably be close. I mean, 57% is within the margin of error. Anything between 60 and 40, in the 50s and 40s is good, because that means the fans are kind of split down the middle on this one, and that's exactly what we want. Make no mistake about it. Now, let's jump into the Q&A before we get to the Contender Series. First up, you got Ghost 960 Red Bull saying, no, he won't. Adesanya will not beat Dreykus Du Plessis. Hey, you're not the only one that's saying that. 57%, right? Are saying that. 57%. Muhammad Abdi 5424 says, because Stipe is the GOAT at heavyweight. I'm not sure why that's hard to comprehend. Oh my goodness. Whether you think Stipe is still able to live up to the perception is another story, but the overall consensus is that Stipe is the greatest of all time in the UFC heavyweight division. Really? Even if it's just the optics, it's important for John to overcome that perception so that once he defeats the Giant, he'll become the new Giant. He can take anybody on after that. I know fans want to see the Aspinall fight, but they are being disingenuous when they act like they can't for the life of them comprehend why John Jones wants Stipe. To say Stipe is the best of all time is really a joke. To me, Francis Ngannou is the best of all time. Maybe he didn't hold the belt as long. Maybe he left the UFC and this and that. But if other than John Jones, if Francis Ngannou stayed in the UFC, nobody would beat him for a long time. It just didn't work out. Stipe, I don't know when the last fight was for Stipe. It's had to be at least 2 or 3 years ago. And whatever happened to the rule that if you hold the belt longer than a year, you'll lose the belt? They stopped following that rule. This is why you have interim champions and things like that. If a guy gets an interim belt, you should have to fight him. That's why they have an interim belt, because someone's on the sidelines. They set up an interim belt, and whoever wins the interim belt fights for the title next. Now all of a sudden you got guys defending interim belts. So you got like 2 champions. What's happening here? You're on an island, not by yourself, but with very few people. There's a lot of people that really think John Jones to me is just taking his sweet time. He knows he's going to whoop Stipe. The guy hasn't fought in 2 or 3, 4 years, whatever. And then he's going to get another year. He's not going to fight Aspinall till 2026 at this rate. And he'll probably retire if he beats Stipe. I mean, something's going on here. JTTJ says, you're a moron. Right? And this is what you get sometimes. I mean, it is what it is. I'm just simply talking about the Apex Center, and you get called a moron. But it's all good. I mean, it's all good. NBA says Drake is going to finish Izzy second round sub/KO. I hear you. Another one weighing in said, I'm coming back here after the fight. Let's see. In terms of Brito versus Juarez at Contender Series, but that fight's not happening now. Stephen Graham says, I absolutely remember that fight. Chuck Liddell is a bad MF. I miss Liddell. Dana White saying that Chuck Liddell KOing Tito Ortiz is one of his best memories in UFC history, mainly because he didn't like Tito Ortiz, right? So watching Chuck Liddell take him out was a great time for Dana White. So that's why he said that. Austin Laxton says, dude, I have no idea who to take in this one, laugh out loud. I don't know how Chandler's gas tank is either. And that's last week when you got Santos versus Chelsea Chandler. Chelsea Chandler came in overweight, and that ruined our prediction because that just made Yana Santos mad, and she took it to her in the first 2 rounds and ran away with the victory. Absolutely. Jason says, Luana Santos not being in Australia yet is a bad look. That's like a week and a half before the fight. You know, and that's not, you know, that's kind of different. Usually the fighters are there pretty quick, but, you know, she's taking her time. Bo Jackson says, Shavkat is great. He knows how to finish ranked guys, unlike your boy, Chimaev. Word. Bottom line is, when Chimaev fought ranked guys, it was in the welterweight division, and it's too light for him. So he really struggled against Gilbert Burns and got injured against Usman. So it is what it is. We don't know really yet with Hamza until he fights Robert Whittaker. It's a major jump up. And when he beats Robert Whittaker, you can't say anything. Kenneth Bruner weighing in says, when Hamza or when Whittaker gets smoked in the first round, I don't want to hear any excuses. And that's what I'm saying too. Bo Jackson's back says, sure, he has a good chance of beating Whittaker. That's not the point. The point is he barely fights. Hasn't shown to finish top guys and gets sick very easily. Chimaev is a wimp, more or less, in the punch bowl, if you will. You know, so guys are going back and forth. It's only going to get more heated as we get closer and closer to the fight. At Homework says, respect to Rob. Yeah, Robert Whittaker called for this fight after the fact. I mean, he called for this fight. He wants to fight, and you got to give credit where credit's due in this one. Bottom line is Robert Whittaker is not ducking Hamza. He went out there and just dominated Ikram Aliskerov, a guy that was basically 15-0, 15-1 if you count the Hamza loss. And people think as he beat Aliskerov that way that he's going to beat Hamza. But let's not forget, Hamza beat Aliskerov. So, you know, we really don't know yet. The bottom line is, as UFC fans, you know, I'm a major Hamza fan, but just as UFC fans down the middle, we want to see Hamza and Whittaker at their best, so we really know what's up, right? We want to see those two at their best, so we really know what the deal is. Now, let's jump into Dana White's Contender Series. Week 1, tomorrow night, right? First fight of the night. First fight of roughly 50 fights at the Contender Series is a flyweight division fight. You got Loner Kavanaugh, perfect 6-0, taking on Antuan Ho, who's also 6-0. So without further ado, let's jump into the first fight and get to this prediction right now. In the flyweight division at Dana White's Contender Series, you got Loner Kavanaugh taking on Antuan Ho. Oh, baby. Flyweight division, 2 smaller guys. Kavanaugh 6-0, Ho 6-0 as well. Ho's 2 inches taller, 5'6". He's 23. Kavanaugh 25. A little more about Kavanaugh and his 6 wins, 3 KOs, 1 submission, 2 decisions. Right, no losses. His last fight he won by decision in March 2024. Now Antuan Ho, aka the Highlight, he's got 3 KOs, 1 submission, and 2 decisions. So these guys are very close in capability of winning, but what I see about Ho is that he's fighting at a LFA, and he's won the last 3, 1 by KO, 2 by decision. So that's interesting, but his opponent's also fighting at a Cage Warrior. So man, I tell you what, this might be the fight of the night. I think this thing is going to a decision, and I think Kavanaugh from China is going to pull this thing out, right? It's going to be very close. Again, I think it's going to a decision, but I think the numbers everywhere are close. This could come down to takedown defense. So that leads me to believe Kavanaugh will win this one, in my opinion, to move to 7-0. But great fight here. Flyweight division. Dana White's Contender Series. Yeah, so we got Loner Kavanaugh winning that one, and it should be said before we go any further that these fights are much harder to predict. This is a Contender Series. These guys are coming out of regional MMA promotions. They're harder for us to know about. We don't have UFC stats like significant strikes per minute, takedowns, takedown defense, control time. We don't have any of those stats. Common opponents, none of that. So sometimes people will weigh in on these prediction videos and say, man, you don't even watch the fights. You don't know what you're talking about. Dude, I watch nearly 500 UFC fights a year. I watch 50 fights in a Contender Series. I watch every episode of The Ultimate Fighter. Dude, that's enough. No, I'm not watching regional MMA fights. I'll catch one here and there. But when you're doing videos like I am, podcasts, predictions, reactions, watch parties, all these things, no, I'm not watching the regional fights. I'm looking at trends. I'm looking at what promotion, if they're fighting out of LFA and they're winning and the other guy's fighting out of a promotion I never heard of, or they're fighting out of LFA, PFL, one championship, whatever it may be. Yeah, I think they got a better chance to win. But, to say I should be watching these fights, it's like, dude, I don't have unlimited time, man. I don't have unlimited time. So we're not going to be perfect here by any means. Now, as we work our way up, featherweight fight 2, Jose Delgado, 7-1 versus Ernie Juarez, 8-0. So this should be an interesting fight. The featherweight needs more fighters, no doubt about it. So one of these guys is likely to get into the UFC unless it's just a boring fight. So let's get into that prediction right now. In the featherweight division at Dana White's Contender Series, you got Jose Delgado taking on Ernie Juarez. Now, Delgado's 7-1, Juarez 8-0, but Delgado's still the favorite in this one. Slightly. Well, actually 3-1, not slight at all. He's 3 inches taller, 5'11". Both guys 26 years old. Delgado has a 3-inch reach advantage, and he's a switch stance fighter. Now, in his 7 wins, he's got 3 KOs and 4 submissions. So this guy finishes people. The one time he didn't finish his opponent, that's when he suffered the loss. That was back in 2023. His latest victory is at LFA 188, where he won by KO. And that was back just a month ago. So quick turnaround for him. Keep that in mind. Now, Ernie Juarez in his 7 wins. Remember, he's undefeated, no losses. He's got 2 KOs and 2 submissions. 3 decisions. So he's proved he can win every which way. He's been fighting at a Uriah Faber's A1 combat. So not quite as high level as LFA, but still some really good competition. So how's this one going to play out? To me, Delgado's faced better competition, especially in his last fight at LFA, which ended in 1:20 seconds, and he's shown that he can fight and fight at a high level. So I got no choice but to go with Delgado. It's not that Juarez can't win, but to me, he's unproven at this point in time. Delgado has a loss, which only makes him better going forward. That's why he's won 4 in a row. So I look for Delgado to win this fight, but likely by decision, right? Even though Delgado's finished every fight he's won, I think he's going to show that he can go to a decision, and he'll still get the UFC contract, because Dana White knows he's a finisher, but has proven himself in every which way. Usually when you get a decision, you're not guaranteed a contract, but I think the winner of this one is. The featherweight division needs some beef, and Delgado will make his way into the UFC. That's my opinion here. Featherweight division, Dana White's Contender Series. Yeah, so a decision gives Delgado a 50-50 chance of getting into the UFC. A finish is always more helpful. Make no mistake about it. I think Delgado wins, but he needs a finish. In the next one, it's Georgia versus Brazil. And I'm not talking about Atlanta, Georgia, right? I'm talking about Georgia, the country. You got Mikhail Shaziani, if I said that right. He's 13-2, taking on Bruno Lopes, who's 12-1. I think the winner of this fight is almost guaranteed to get into UFC, because they got a lot of experience coming in. We're not talking like the previous fight with 8 or 7 fights. We're talking 14, 13 fights into this thing. So keep that in mind. So let's get into it. In the light heavyweight division at Dana White's Contender Series, the first fight of week 1. Contender Series is back. You got Shaziani coming in at 13-2, taking on Bruno Lopes, who comes in at 12-1. This is Georgia versus Brazil. And I'm not talking Georgia, USA. I'm talking Georgia, right? Bruno Lopes, 2 inches taller at 6'2". We have a little more information on him, like he's 31. He's got a 75-inch reach, fights right-handed, 5.3 significant strikes per minute in his lone fight with stats, probably in the Contender Series. Now the Georgian, Saziani, 13 wins, 12 by KO, 1 by decision. He's lost twice by KO and submission, but that last loss came in March of 2022. So that's the big question, the takedown game. We know the guy can land KOs. Bruno Lopes, in his 12 wins, he's got 5 KO, 5 submissions, 5 decisions. He did lose once by KO, okay? So for Saziani, can he defend takedowns and get the KO? For Lopes, can he avoid the KO and land takedowns? This is just what's going to happen. Now, Lopes did lose to Brenson Ribeiro, who we know is a pretty good fighter, right? By first round KO. So again, he's got to avoid that KO ability, but Ribeiro had really good takedown defense. That's going to be the big question. But they're not bringing in the Georgian here because he's not good and can't defend takedowns. All those guys, yeah, are trying to KO each other, but there's a lot of control and takedowns attempted in that part of the world. So I'm leaning on Saziani to get the win here. That's just how I believe it's going to go. He's just better and bigger. He's going to win and move to 14-2, light heavyweight division. Dana White's Contender Series. Yeah, and that's one of them rare times I go against a Brazilian. I mean, usually if I'm not sure, especially in the Contender Series when I'm not sure, I'm almost always going with the Brazilian. There's so many Brazilians in the UFC, you got to believe that the guy from Brazil is getting into the UFC, right? But I'm going with Saziani here, the dog. It's close, though. I mean, Lopes is like a 2-1 favorite, but Saziani, these Georgians are tough, man. These guys from that part of the world, Dagestani, Russian, all that, these guys are always better than you think. Now, as we work our way up into the co-main event, it's a welterweight division fight. Ding Meng takes on Rami Hamed. Hamed's a latecomer. Meng was already on this card. Guy's 42 fights into the career, and he's only 29 years old. You want to talk about active, it doesn't get more active than that. He's got a wealth of experience, and will it matter that he has a different opponent? I don't know, but it shouldn't, because the experience should just take over. That's the bottom line. So let's get into the co-main event right now. In the welterweight division at Dana White's Contender Series, you got Ding Meng taking on Rami Hamed, and Hamed's taking this fight on short notice. Meng is ever the veteran in MMA, 34-8. As a professional, Hamed 12-3. Meng is a slight favorite in this one. He's 1 inch 1 inch taller at 6'2". He's 29, right in the middle of the prime. Hamed still in the prime, barely, at 33 years old. Meng has a 1-inch reach advantage. Both fighters fight right-handed. Now, Meng in his 34 wins, 27 KOs. That's why this guy is here. This guy just KOs people fighting out of China. In his 8 losses, he's lost every which way. 2 KOs, 4 submissions, 2 decisions. Now, Hamed, again, taking his fight on short notice in his 12 wins. He's got 8 KOs and 1 submission. In the 3 losses, he was submitted 3 times. So I don't think the submission is a problem here for the Hamed, who's fighting out of Beirut. I think he's got to be more worried about being KO'd. So he's never been KO'd in his career, but his opponent has 27 KOs, so look out. There's no way I'm going against Ding Meng here. This guy's a KO specialist. I believe he gets the KO here and earns a spot, a contract in the UFC. That's what's up for grabs. So Ding Meng with the KO, in my opinion, to move to 35-8, welterweight division, Dana White's Contender Series. Yeah, and you see the 42 fights, and how do you go against this guy? Yeah, he's got 8 losses outside the UFC, but he's not even 30 yet. 30 is like the prime time age in all of sports, but especially in MMA. This guy has 42 fights. He's 29 years old. He's the perfect guy to bring into the UFC, no doubt about it. So I like Ding Meng to get the job done. Now, the new main event changed just this week. It's a middleweight division fight. 2 big guys early in their career. Mansur Abdul Malik, 5-0. Wes Schultz, 6-1. Doesn't get better than this. You might, if they're in the main event, despite the lack of fights, and there's a finish, that guy's getting into the UFC. So all eyes will be on this fight. Make no mistake about it. So let's get into the main event, middleweight division, right now. In the middleweight division at Dana White's Contender Series, you got Mansur Abdul Malik taking on Wes Schultz. All right, so Contender Series is back, and you got two good ones here. Abdul Malik 5-0, Schultz 6-1. Both guys 6'2". Abdul Malik is 26 years old, Schultz is 27, and Abdul Malik has a 4-inch reach advantage, 80 to 76. So keep that in mind. Now he's 5-0. He's got 4 wins by KO, 1 by submission. So he's looked good. Fought an LFA the last time out. Now Schultz has been fighting in LFA, where he's got 2 KOs, 3 submissions, 1 decision. Only loss was to Dylan Buka. Heard that name. Lost that fight by decision, right? In the last 3, he's won 2 by KO and 1 by submission. So that's what causes me some worry for Abdul Malik, who I know can KO people. Yeah, he's got 1 submission, but I just have a feeling that Wes Schultz is going to be better on the ground. And he probably learned something from the loss that he sustained, right? And he's ready for this environment. This is USA versus USA. Not that that matters, but the point is no matter who wins, there's no bias here. The bottom line is I think Wes Schultz is just going to be better on the ground. He's going to be able to limit Abdul Malik, which will allow him to get the victory, but it may not be good enough to get him into the UFC. Unless he can get the submission. We'll have to wait and see. But I still believe, in my opinion, Wes Schultz wins this fight to move to 7-1, middleweight division, Dana White's Contender Series. Yeah, and at the time, it was a co-main event. So even if there's a decision and it's a really good fight, there's a good chance that he still gets into the UFC, right? Because it's the main event. And it's a light heavyweight division fight. It's a middleweight division fight. And, you got a lot of good competitors in the middleweight division. It's pretty deep right now, so it's not guaranteed, but you can always use another middleweight fighter, right? You got 4 or 5 guys right now. If Hamza can get his win against Whitaker, then you got 5 guys in that division, and it's getting deeper and deeper, but you still can add more. So look for him to make his way into the UFC. So that's week 1 of the Contender Series. We're going to be back next week with week 2. Something new we're doing this year. We want to cover the Contender Series even more, because we're starting to realize, man, that these guys that come through the Contender Series end up doing some big things in the UFC, and sometimes even work their way up into title contention. So it's a must that we get into it. But listen, that's a wrap, man. We'll be back later in the week with some more UFC news. UFC 305 is going down this Saturday, so we're going to, once we get to the press conference and all that, we're going to have a lot more to talk about. Because you already know Adesanya and Duplessis are not going to hold back. These guys do not like each other, and both want to win very badly. So for now, this is your boy Chris Cross. Hope you have a great day, and God bless, as always. Peace.